Picture this: Keanu Reeves, the internet's saintly heartthrob, storms into the glitzy Regent Crown Hotel under a pitch-black, moonless sky, armed with nothing but a scruffy backpack and a smirk that could topple empires, ready to detonate a secret so explosive it'd make the hotel's snooty staff wish they'd never been born. No paparazzi flash, no roaring limo, no groveling bellhops tripping over themselves to kiss his boots. Just a lone figure slinking into a fortress of wealth and arrogance. A place so exclusive it'd turn away Jesus himself if he didn't flash a black Amex. Why would a global icon, drowning in cash and adored by millions, sneak into this elitist snake pit without so much as a whisper? Buckle up, because Keanu's not just here to crash the party. He's about to rip the gilded mask off the Regent Crown, exposing a scandalous underbelly of snobbery, so vile it'll make your blood boil and your jaw drop. This isn't just a hotel stay. It's a reckoning that'll shred the facade of luxury and leave the high and mighty trembling in their overpriced loafers. Keanu Reeves arrived at the opulent Regent Crown Hotel under a moonless sky, carrying nothing more than an unassuming backpack and a subtle smile, prepared to reveal a secret that not even the most seasoned staff could have anticipated. There had been no hint of paparazzi, no luxurious car sweeping into the circular driveway, and no staff members rushing to carry his things. This was precisely the way he wanted it, to appear in the stillness of night, obscure and anonymous, in a place known for its strict exclusivity. One might wonder why a Hollywood star worth millions, someone recognized worldwide for his gracious spirit, would slip into a high-profile hotel without making a single announcement. And yet, his decision to do so would not merely test the resort's famed hospitality. It would uproot the very foundation of its carefully cultivated prestige. The Regent Crown Hotel sat like a jewel in the beating heart of New York City. By day, its polished marble floors glittered with reflections from the towering windows that caught sunlight in radiant arcs. By night, it transformed into a realm of hushed sophistication, well-heeled guests gliding across red velvet carpets, staff moving swiftly but discreetly in the background. The building itself was a marriage of old-world charm and modern opulence. A row of crystal chandeliers floated overhead in the lobby, sparkling like miniature galaxies. The slightest click of expensive shoes on marble announced a traveler who deemed themselves important enough to stay at this luxurious address. Beneath the immaculate exterior, however, a well-kept secret had taken shape over the years. The staff, some new, some with decades of service, had begun to sort people into tiers. Those arriving in tailored suits, polished shoes, and shining jewelry were offered instantaneous smiles. Those bearing more modest appearances, or those who failed to project an immediate aura of wealth, received colder gazes or subtle rejections masked as policy. It happened quietly, a nudge from the front desk here, an unspoken refusal of courtesy there. Over time, the warmth the hotel used to champion had receded, replaced by a culture in which employees felt compelled to protect the hotel's aura of luxury above all else. No one bore this responsibility more fiercely than Victoria Sinclair, the senior manager entrusted with maintaining the Regent Crown's elite reputation. She was tall, poised, and elegantly dressed, and her presence alone sent new staff into anxious attempts at perfection. Victoria's entire professional life orbited around guaranteeing that every corner of the Regent Crown shined with exclusivity. She championed the belief that the world's wealthiest guests deserved an experience that reinforced their sense of status. And on that quiet, starless night, she felt no suspicion whatsoever that a man passing through the ornate revolving doors, wearing worn jeans and a dark hoodie, was anything but an accidental wanderer. Keanu's arrival was as uneventful as stepping across a threshold. Some employees sneaked uncertain glances, but most were too preoccupied to pay attention. The final wave of late-night arrivals was demanding that typical swirl of sign-ins and luggage assistance. He appeared, in that moment, like a traveler simply drifting in from the busy Manhattan streets, possibly seeking directions or hoping for a last-minute room. Nothing about his gait or the mild curvature of his grin suggested he was the Regent Crown's new majority stakeholder. In truth, that knowledge was locked away in the upper echelons of the hotel's ownership structure, which seldom concerned the rank-and-file staff. A recent corporate sale had passed controlling shares to an unnamed buyer, spurring speculation among top executives, but leaving the day-to-day employees largely in the dark. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation. And if you want to see how far it goes, subscribe now before it disappears. Before he even approached the front desk, Keanu let his gaze sweep across the scene. the polished vases brimming with fresh orchids, the staff members clad in pristine uniforms guiding well-dressed customers to their rooms. Every detail seemed curated to broadcast the message. Here, only the best belong. He could sense the gentle tension in the air, as if the building itself bristled at any sign of imperfection. He could see it in how a front desk agent glanced skeptically at an older couple with scuffed suitcases, directing them away with a sympathetic apology about fully booked rooms, then offering an eager welcome to a sleek-suited businessman before the couple had fully turned around. This was precisely why he had come unannounced, to experience firsthand how a prestigious institution treated outsiders without the safety net of recognizable fame. There was a vague hush as he stepped toward the check-in counter, a hush that came from eyes noticing an unfamiliar figure they judged unworthy of the hotel's standard. The senior manager, Victoria, observed him out of the corner of her eye. She had performed this silent evaluation many times, the traveler's clothes, hairstyle, body language. Everything about Keanu's exterior suggested he was not the typical clientele. She watched him draw closer, and something in her posture stiffened with faint disapproval. Her colleagues, too, seemed to sense the subtle tension. One agent discreetly shifted from behind a podium to stand near Victoria. Another staff member began reorganizing forms, as though preparing to explain, gently, that the hotel might not have a place for a casual walk-in tonight. Keanu paused at the gleaming marble desk. The hush of the lobby enveloped them. By now, almost every staffer in proximity was focused on the interaction, bracing for the inevitable. In the Regent Crown, anyone without a polished facade or prior VIP introduction tended to be dismissed. The staff had been trained, whether implicitly or explicitly, to guard the exclusivity of the premises at any cost. Victoria was the face of that guard dog posture. Her shoulders pulled back, and with a polite but cool tone, she asked for the guest's name, wanting to verify that he was indeed expected here. In her mind, though, she already tallied the reasons he would likely need to be directed to a different establishment. The man introduced himself in a measured, nearly hushed voice. He provided a reservation name. Without a direct glance at the system, Victoria informed him that the Regent Crown rarely accepted last-minute arrivals, especially from individuals who did not match its typical profile of high-end travelers. She explained that the nightly rates far exceeded what casual tourists usually paid. Her statements were delivered in a gentle, polished manner, carefully phrased to avoid outright rudeness. Yet the meaning was clear. The Regent Crown demanded a particular image, and it was unlikely he belonged. Still, Keanu's eyes gave away no offense. He remained calm, politely clarifying that he did, in fact, have arrangements under the name Reeves. Victoria, following the hotel's usual pattern, did not even look to confirm that claim. The mention of Reeves meant nothing to her in that context. With a small, controlled inhale, she repeated that rooms at the Regent Crown started in a lofty price range, that only pre-approved guests were permitted short-notice bookings, and that she would gladly provide a list of alternate hotels more aligned with someone of his apparent means. Behind her words hovered a simple message: "You do not belong here." Several meters away, the doorman shuffled with visible uncertainty. A bellhop, only on his second month at the hotel, recognized the man's face but stayed quiet, recalling the quiet pressure from management to follow the Regent Crown's unspoken code. Let managers decide who is worthy. The hush in the marble foyer deepened, punctuated by the faint hum of elevator doors sliding open and closed. Keanu then, politely and with an almost imperceptible smile, requested that he speak with the hotel's owner. This suggestion was so incongruent with the typical chain of communication that it nearly made Victoria blink in surprise. In her mind, the notion that this plainly dressed individual might warrant a face-to-face with ownership bordered on absurd. She reasoned that the real owner, a mysterious figure rumored to have purchased a controlling share, barely made public appearances, much less entertained walk-ins with no credentials. With mild exasperation, Victoria explained that no direct conversation with ownership would be possible that night. It might have remained an inconsequential exchange, but Keanu discreetly made a quick phone call. In seconds, the entire mood of the lobby shifted, as though someone had flicked a switch. The private elevator at the far end of the hall opened, revealing Richard Morgan, a senior executive who handled top-tier corporate matters for the Regent Crown. Richard, known for his unflappable composure and borderline obsession with keeping the hotel's brand pristine, strode out with an edge of panic in his eyes. He walked past staff who seemed transfixed by confusion, heading directly toward Keanu. In a calm but urgent greeting, Richard welcomed the man, addressing him with a respect that no one had witnessed him offer to any other visitor that month. In that instant, onlookers realized that the unassuming figure in the hoodie and jeans was none other than the new majority stakeholder. Victoria felt her entire chest tighten, her carefully honed mask of professional composure momentarily fracturing. The eyes of staff pivoted back and forth, from the senior executive who had always championed the hotel's exclusivity to the quietly powerful newcomer who owned all they saw, and to Victoria, who now looked as though she wanted to vanish into the plush carpeting. It became unmistakably clear that she had nearly forced out the very person who held ultimate authority over the property. The manager, typically so sure-footed, understood she was standing on the edge of a monumental personal reckoning. Her insistence that he was out of place had been a grave error. This realization was visible on her face, and the hush in the lobby thickened into an almost tangible force. Richard Morgan, his expression saturated with relief that he had intercepted the scenario in time, ushered Keanu away from the front desk, speaking in hushed tones. Yet the conversation, from what fragment staff could see, was entirely courteous on Keanu's side. He did not storm or rage. He did not demand immediate dismissals. Instead, he displayed an otherworldly calm that felt even more humbling. Soon, he turned his gaze back toward Victoria, indicating that she and the rest of the staff should gather. Word traveled quickly. The new owner, this apparently down-to-earth celebrity investor, wanted to speak to everyone. It was an unusual request at such a late hour, but no one dared object. They convened in the Grand Conference Hall, a space rarely used at this hour. Ornate sconces gleamed on the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Manhattan skyline as if in a gilded frame. The employees, from bellhops to housekeeping supervisors, from front desk clerks to the night shift security team, assembled in uneven rows of confusion and worry. Victoria stood at the front, shoulders tense, striving to maintain an air of composure. She remembered the hush that had followed her earlier conversation, and an undercurrent of dread prickled through her. What if she lost her position? What if her single misjudgment overshadowed the years she had dedicated to rising through the ranks? When everyone had settled, Keanu took a moment to observe the staff, anxious faces, fidgeting hands, stolen glances in his direction. He then addressed them collectively, explaining that he had arrived unannounced to understand how the hotel functioned when there was no performance for wealthy visitors, no stage spectacle for a known VIP. He mentioned that his reason for choosing the Regent Crown was rooted in its sterling reputation for hospitality, a reputation he now feared might be compromised by superficial judgments. Victoria felt a sting in her chest at the indirect mention of her blunder. Yet the new owner's calm manner was almost more piercing than anger would have been. It conveyed disappointment on a deeper level, suggesting that the entire staff, starting with her, had let him down in a fundamental way. He affirmed that exclusivity alone was not the hallmark of a truly great hotel. Luxury, as far as he was concerned, meant going above and beyond for every single patron who walked in, not merely for the recognizable or obviously wealthy. He wanted to implement changes immediately to restore the Regent Crown's authenticity. Staff would receive new training to ensure that no visitor was turned away or treated with condescension based on an assumption about status or wealth. Upon hearing this, Victoria remembered the faces of patrons she had politely nudged elsewhere over the years. She pictured the glint of embarrassment in their eyes as they realized they were unwelcome. It was not a memory she liked to relive, but standing in that meeting, she realized how normal the practice had become. Still, she had never paused to question it until that moment. Richard Morgan, who had introduced Keanu to the group, requested that Victoria coordinate these training measures, not out of condemnation, but because she had been the one in charge of day-to-day standards for so long. A wave of pressure tightened around her ribs. She realized the irony. The very manager who had tried to send the new owner packing now needed to guide the staff into an era of genuine respect. After the meeting concluded, people filed out in subdued chatter, exchanging restless looks. Employees who had witnessed the exchange in the lobby whispered about how close they had come to seeing a meltdown, or even firings, yet none of that transpired. Keanu's approach was subtler, no public confrontation, no immediate retribution. Just a measured resolution that things would, and must, change. Victoria lingered in the corridor, her mind whirling with embarrassment. A handful of staff paused to offer uncertain nods, as though silently acknowledging her precarious situation. She had always prided herself on being the gold standard of hotel management. Now, she felt like an imposter. Eventually, she returned to the front desk, where she caught sight of the same bellhop who had recognized Keanu's face from the moment he walked in, but had stayed silent. The young man stood there awkwardly, uncertain whether he, too, might be held accountable for not speaking up. By the next afternoon, rumors had spread among daytime workers about the new owner's midnight arrival. Whispers floated through hallways and service doors, reaching from housekeeping to the executive offices. Many responded with a kind of cautious optimism. Perhaps the Regent Crown's impersonal approach would be softened. Others were more cynical, suspecting that the ownership change might be short-lived or that no real improvement would come. Through all of this, Victoria maintained a stern facade, immersing herself in formulating an updated staff protocol to enforce this new standard of all-inclusive courtesy. She recalled her own beginnings years prior, when she first started at the hotel as an assistant in event planning. Back then, the Regent Crown had boasted a friendlier ambience, still luxurious but not quite so stifling. Over time, as she climbed the ranks, the focus on filtering out the undesirable guests had become sharper, a transformation she had championed to rise to her current position. Now it felt as if the floor had dropped beneath her. That evening, she was summoned to a small, private lounge where Keanu was reviewing hotel files with Richard Morgan. Entering the space, she felt a flutter of anxiety. She expected, perhaps, a direct reprimand. But again, his manner was calm, almost reassuring. He reiterated the same conviction he had shared with the staff. He wanted to restore the essence of genuine hospitality at the hotel. He believed that an establishment reached true excellence not by pushing away those deemed unworthy, but by treating every person with respect. Victoria absorbed his words with a blend of relief and remorse. On one hand, she was relieved he had not demanded her immediate resignation. On the other, she was struck by how thoroughly her worldview needed to shift. She offered him her commitment to spearhead the new training and policy enforcement. The transformation, he insisted, had to be more than an official pronouncement. It needed to permeate every corner of daily operations. Word spread that Keanu might stay for a while incognito. This news kept the staff on edge, because no one was entirely sure when or how he would choose to test them again. Some employees suspected he might appear in different guises or check in under pseudonyms. Others thought he might monitor check-ins from behind the scenes. The result was a subtle but noticeable overhaul in the way the staff approached everyone. The older couple with well-worn luggage, the middle-aged man with wrinkled khakis, the young woman who seemed uneasy about the five-star prices. Each was suddenly greeted with warmth and invited to partake of the Regent Crown's amenities. Victoria found herself in the tricky position of enforcing these new standards while grappling with her own habitual inclinations. She had to confront the fact that she had once considered herself an expert in service, but had become blind to the damage inflicted by her selective approach. Each time she spotted a staff member quietly brushing off a guest, she stepped in. One evening, she noticed a concierge offering dismissive gestures to a traveler who did not appear wealthy. Stepping forward, she gently but firmly reminded the concierge that times had changed. Every person in the lobby deserved their best. This internal shift did not come easily. There were moments when Victoria felt a pang of impatience bubble up, reflexes honed by years of filtering out the so-called unqualified. Each time, she remembered the mild disappointment in Keanu's eyes that night in the conference room. That memory was enough to compel her to readjust her attitude. Meanwhile, Keanu moved through the hotel almost like a ghost. Sometimes, staff reported glimpses of him in the corridors or near the less frequented exits, dressed inconspicuously, always ready with a friendly nod but never with a big show. At first, a few employees continued to treat him with starstruck reverence, but Keanu would simply wave them off and ask that they return to their usual tasks. The less attention they paid to him, the better he liked it. This hands-off approach helped everyone focus not on impressing the boss, but on genuinely improving service. Late one night, Victoria walked past the lounge where the lights were dimmed and saw Keanu leaning over a thick binder of financial data. He was cross-referencing numbers for upcoming renovations, plans set in motion by prior management, trying to determine whether they aligned with his new philosophy. She paused, hidden from his view, and marveled at how quietly dedicated he was to a cause that some owners might have delegated to countless subordinates. He seemed determined to understand every facet of the hotel, from the big-budget expansions to the daily interactions that made or broke its reputation. That same night, A small group of staff lingered in the kitchen after hours, discussing the shift in hotel culture. They recognized that, in the short run, it might mean more unpredictable guests, more walk-ins, more uncertain revenue streams. But many felt a renewed sense of purpose. The intangible tension of constantly evaluating a person's worth was beginning to recede. Yet not everyone was pleased. A contingent of long-serving employees, proud of the Regent Crown's old standards, grumbled. They feared that relaxing the exclusivity would tarnish the brand, that indulging ordinary guests might chase away the ultra-elite clientele. Whispers circulated that Keanu's approach might be naive. Some claimed that his Hollywood idealism could never survive the harsh realities of high-end hospitality. Victoria heard these complaints, and while a part of her once would have agreed, she now felt she had glimpsed a truer vision of excellence. Quietly, she started scheduling staff meetings to address these concerns, reminding everyone that a person's attire or aura did not determine their worth. She emphasized that a shift toward universal respect would actually enhance the hotel's image and create loyal guests who felt welcomed. In the midst of these transformations, another wave of tension emerged. Rumors spread that an anonymous, influential figure would be arriving soon, someone with an elaborate security detail. The staff readied themselves, expecting a typical show of wealth. But as the day approached, they learned that no official car service had been ordered, no list of demands had come in, and there were no flamboyant instructions for a suite full of rare flowers. Only an oddly quiet reservation. They wondered, could this be Keanu testing them again? When a subdued-looking man in a simple jacket did indeed arrive at the front desk on that rumored date, heads turned. A staff member approached, stepping behind the desk in the hopes of recognizing the name. Victoria, who was standing nearby, watched carefully. This traveler's name did not appear on the usual VIP lists. The staff member, newly trained in the revised approach, greeted him politely, explained that they were pleased to check him in, and inquired how they could assist him further. The man, unaccustomed to such courtesy in a place of evident luxury, expressed appreciation for being treated like any other valuable guest. Observing from a short distance, Victoria felt a stir of pride. In the not-so-distant past, a person like this would likely have been curtly turned away, or at least subjected to suspicious questioning. Now, he was receiving genuine warmth. Perhaps the changes were truly sinking in. And indeed, the man turned out to be a longtime friend of Keanu's, someone who liked to travel unannounced, evaluating hotels from a stance of anonymity. His quiet endorsement would later become an unseen boon to the Regent Crown's evolving reputation. Behind the scenes, Richard Morgan continued to handle the upper-level aspects of ownership, signing documents to finalize expansions or to revise old contracts. Victoria and Keanu crossed paths in a cordial, cooperative manner. There was no further tension. The staff underwent sessions on unconscious biases, empathy in service, and best practices for conflict resolution. Slowly, the energy in the hallways lifted. Even the longtime employees who had grumbled at first began to see the positive effects. A sincere note of gratitude from a middle-class couple who managed to splurge on a night's stay, heartfelt recommendations on travel forums praising the respectful treatment from staff, and an overall shift in how guests described the Regent Crown's ambience. It would be dishonest to claim there were no hiccups. One afternoon, a well-off returning guest became enraged because she was no longer receiving noticeably special privileges over others. She refused to accept that the hotel would greet a casually dressed visitor with the same courtesy extended to her. She complained to Victoria, confident that her loyal patronage granted her authority. In the past, Victoria would have swiftly catered to such demands, but she now offered the new perspective. All guests would be treated with dignity. The woman fumed and threatened to withdraw her future reservations, but ironically Keanu, who happened to be passing through, heard of the incident and let her know, indirectly, that the hotel's updated values would stand. To everyone's surprise, she eventually accepted the explanation and returned a month later, her posture a bit more humble. The most significant transformation occurred behind the scenes, in the hearts and minds of staff who realized how small, daily choices determined the hotel's character. The lesson was becoming ingrained. A single glance of dismissal or a single wave of the hand could erode someone's dignity, and that was not the standard they wished to uphold. For so long, they had believed elitism was their main selling point. Now, the realization dawned that genuine hospitality was the real jewel. Weeks passed in a flurry of renovations, updated training manuals, and more subtle visits by Keanu in various disguises, or so the rumor mill claimed. In truth, some nights he only walked through the lobby in simple clothing, carrying a newspaper or wearing a cap. He would watch how staff reacted. On more than one occasion, he found them politely directing uncertain travelers toward open spots at the bar, offering free coffee if someone had to wait. No one asked about finances or attire. Staff now consistently asked how they could be of service, rather than determining whether to show service at all. What had begun as a humiliating slip on Victoria's part, the night she dismissed Keanu Reeves as a mere intruder, had evolved into a wave of culture shift. Yet the story was still unfolding. The next challenge loomed on the horizon, a large-scale charity event that had been planned months ago. The Regent Crown would host a crowd of donors, socialites, and A-list celebrities. There would be cameras, invitations passed among the wealthy, and a host of brand new staff brought in just for the high-profile affair. Could the hotel preserve its new approach under that old, intense spotlight? Or would the glitz and glamour entice employees to revert to their selective ways of catering only to those who dazzled? Victoria felt both excitement and anxiety about this upcoming event. She recognized it as a defining moment. If the Regent Crown could maintain its fresh perspective even with that wave of influential guests, the shift would be real and lasting. If it faltered, or if staff neglected ordinary attendees among the extravagance, it might signal that these changes were only surface deep. Meanwhile, Keanu occasionally stopped by the management offices. He and Victoria had brief, cordial exchanges, neither focusing on the memory of that night in the lobby. But underneath their professionalism, an unspoken understanding flowed. They both recognized how small decisions, repeated 1,000 times, shaped the soul of any place. The fate of the Regent Crown hinged on whether they could cement this new ethos so deeply that not even the highest-paying guests could overshadow it. In the final days leading up to the high-profile charity event, tension buzzed through the staff, but so did a sense of collective pride. They had come this far, reorienting not just superficial policies but their very mindset. And as Victoria oversaw the installation of decorations, towering floral arrangements, subtle lighting displays, she recalled the wave of shame and shock she had felt when she discovered who Keanu truly was. She vowed never again to let an outside impression guide her sense of how to treat another human being. On the eve of the event, with the grand ballroom decorated in lavish detail and a flurry of staff rehearsing their newly learned courtesy, Victoria stepped onto the mezzanine for a moment of solitude. She gazed down at the polished floors below, where employees were carefully positioning an opulent archway for the soon-to-arrive VIP guests. In that reflective hush, she considered her own transformation. She realized that, for years, she had equated authority with being selective, deciding who merited the Regent Crown's best. Yet now she knew that true authority lay in empowering her team to treat every traveler with empathy. At that moment, she caught sight of Keanu lingering near a tall window that overlooked the city. He was dressed inconspicuously, as always, but carried an air of easy assurance. Their eyes met briefly, and he offered a slight nod. It was as if he were silently acknowledging her growth. She felt an odd mix of humility and resolve. They were partners now, in a sense, united in changing a hotel's culture one small moment at a time. Still, neither one knew precisely how the charity event would unfold. This was the Regent Crown's ultimate test, where old expectations of grandeur and exclusivity would crash headlong into the new ethic of unconditional respect. Would the staff hold the line, or cave once faced with the demanding personalities and fragile egos that often accompanied such high-profile gatherings? Would Victoria herself remain unwavering when confronted by the sorts of wealthy patrons she once believed she had to placate at all costs? And in the swirl of fancy dresses, popping champagne corks, and media cameras, what role would Keanu Reeves choose to play? Was he ready to step into the spotlight as the owner, or would he remain on the periphery, silently observing how much had truly changed, and how much remained the same? The answers would soon be revealed under the shimmering glow of crystal chandeliers and the hum of live music. The Regent Crown Hotel was about to face its biggest challenge yet, proving that the promise of genuine hospitality was more than an illusion, but a new cornerstone for a legendary establishment. Under the sparkling glow of a late autumn sunset, the grand ballroom of the Regent Crown Hotel stood ready for a night of high-stakes glamour and profound transformation. The event, long publicized as a charity gala featuring elite donors, socialites, and celebrities, had drawn extensive media attention. For most upscale hotels, an evening like this was simply an opportunity to flaunt luxury. But for the Regent Crown, This particular night represented the critical juncture, where its newly forged values would either flourish or collapse under old pressures. For days, employees had orchestrated every detail: gold-edged invitations, lavish table centerpieces, a menu curated by a renowned chef. Outside the double doors leading into the ballroom, staff members directed the arrival of specialized teams, ensuring that photographers, caterers, and stage coordinators understood the flow of the evening. The atmosphere was electric with promise. Some workers excitedly whispered that the event might attract the biggest names in film, finance, and politics. Others fretted that, amid so much glitz, it could be all too easy to slide back into ingrained habits of deference toward the most visibly wealthy. Inside the building, the corridors brimmed with staff wearing crisp uniforms. Though the usual hush of a five-star environment lingered, there was a more purposeful energy in every footstep. The employees knew that Keanu Reeves, recently revealed as the majority stakeholder, would be closely observing this night, but not from any spotlight. True to his habit of traveling unnoticed, he intended to drift in and out of the gala as just another attendee. For him, the fundamental question was whether the Regent Crown could uphold its newly minted culture of universal respect, even when the stakes were at their highest. Victoria Sinclair, standing outside the ballroom's main doors, could feel her nerves churning. She had been a driving force in planning this charity gala months ago, back when her outlook was different. Back when the hotel's entire identity centered on curated exclusivity. At that time, she had imagined an elite evening under chandeliers, with well-heeled guests commending her staff's ability to keep undesirable visitors at bay. Now she saw the event in a new light. Rather than preserving distance, the staff would aim to embrace every attendee with genuine hospitality. For all the friction she had experienced after her humiliating mistake, turning Keanu away when he first arrived, Victoria felt a cautious optimism that the night would prove how deeply the hotel had changed. Invited guests began arriving shortly before dusk. Some arrived in sleek black cars, emerging in designer dresses and tailored suits. Others came with far less pageantry, stepping out of modest vehicles or walking from local transit. A few were celebrities accustomed to red carpets, while others were simply philanthropic individuals who had donated in quieter ways. You felt that, didn't you? That was no ordinary moment. If it hit you, hit like, and let's keep going. The front desk hummed with activity as each of them checked in. For many staff members, it felt surreal to greet film stars and millionaires with the same tone of warmth they offered travelers in everyday clothes. Yet no one hesitated. This new approach had become instinct. Meanwhile, Keanu appeared in an unassuming black suit that blended seamlessly into the high-end crowd. He moved without an entourage, politely waving away any fuss. Word had circulated among employees that he would be present, and there were rumors of more disguised spot checks, as staff joked privately. But the watchfulness in the hotel now sprang from a positive place, a renewed determination that not a single guest, famous, unknown, rich, or modest, would feel out of place. Inside the grand ballroom, floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the city skyline, just as the orange haze of sunset transitioned into starlit dusk. Crystal chandeliers overhead refracted the lights in shimmering bursts, and a gentle melody from a string quartet wafted through the air. Circles of tables draped in satin covered much of the open space, each topped with floral centerpieces, shaped like miniature gardens. A long stage, adorned with golden curtains, stood at one end, awaiting speeches and entertainment. The hush of anticipation lay heavy on the air. Early arrivals meandered around, sipping champagne, greeting acquaintances, and admiring the lavish decor. The conversations, often laced with subtle competition, who sat on which board, who had traveled to which exotic locale, still carried the old echo of exclusivity. However, staff who moved among these high-profile attendees never displayed favoritism or condescension. Their attitudes bore the hallmark of the training they had received: consistent courtesy, unwavering helpfulness, and an assumption of goodwill, rather than assumptions about status. Victoria noticed Keanu standing near one of the far windows, alone, gazing at the gleaming cityscape. She did not approach him immediately. She sensed that he preferred to observe rather than disrupt. Instead, she made her way through the crowd, checking on caterers, verifying that the evening's schedule remained on track, and offering a polite welcome to new arrivals who, only a few months earlier, she would have screened more rigorously. Over time, a calm confidence settled into her demeanor, a far cry from her initial anxiety. Then, at a designated moment, the charity's representatives took the stage, calling the gala to official order. A hush fell as the lights dimmed enough to spotlight the front. The speakers announced that this evening's event was dedicated to supporting disaster relief efforts around the globe, a cause important to many of the donors. A short film montage flickered across a large screen, showing communities in need, stories of perseverance, and the tangible results that donations could bring. Moments of hushed awe rippled through the guests, who had largely come to display generosity in a forum that also promised them recognition. During the film, Keanu slipped into a seat at a far table. He kept his posture relaxed, eyes fixed on the images. Although he was well known for philanthropic tendencies, few in the room were aware that he was personally responsible for enabling the entire gala to occur in the Regent Crown's most luxurious space. He had insisted that a significant portion of the venue's fee be waived, so that more funds could be redirected to the cause itself. Typically, an event of this scope would cost donors a fortune just to secure the space. But that fact remained unmentioned in the official program. He seemed content for the audience's focus to linger on the charity's mission, not on him. When the montage ended, the house lights rose, and a round of applause swept the room. Servers emerged to deliver an elegant dinner, and lively conversation resumed. Victoria took this lull to scan the crowd, assessing whether her staff had maintained consistent respect for everyone. She spotted a table near the entrance where an older woman in a simple, yet classic dress was explaining to a staff member that she was not used to places so grand. Victoria watched, prepared to intervene if the staffer showed any sign of dismissiveness. Instead, she saw the employee nod and guide the woman to a seat near the front, ensuring she could see the stage clearly. Across the room, a different staff member knelt beside a wheelchair user, quietly asking if the arrangement of tables allowed for easy maneuverability. The old way, Victoria realized, would have overlooked details like that unless the individual was a known VIP. This new approach now seemed woven into the hotel's fabric. Yet not everyone was equally pleased. A small cluster of guests who prided themselves on exclusivity began eyeing certain individuals at the gala as though they were uninvited intruders. Some well-known millionaires exchanged quizzical looks when they noticed how ordinary donors or quieter philanthropic supporters were intermingling freely. A sense of entitlement flickered in their expressions, as though they felt the hotel had failed to protect them from less polished company. This sentiment crystallized when a controversial figure, a grassroots activist from a local community group, entered the room to share how their neighborhood had benefited from disaster relief in the past. Her presence, bohemian in style and energetic in spirit, clashed with the typical refinement of a five-star ball. She had been invited by the charity's organizers as a personal guest, but a handful of wealthy individuals grew visibly uneasy, muttering that the rundown vibe did not belong in an event of such prestige. Victoria recognized the potential flashpoint. In the past, she would have felt obligated to appease the big donors, possibly steering the activist toward a far corner to keep her less visible. Now she stepped in with renewed conviction. She approached the small cluster of disgruntled patrons, projecting confidence in her posture, and offered them a warm welcome before explaining that every invited attendee deserved the hotel's utmost hospitality. She made it clear, though without direct confrontation, that the Regent Crown's values included a genuine appreciation for every guest, especially those whose experiences could illuminate the cause the gala aimed to support. The wealthy group eventually quieted, though not entirely graciously, giving half-hearted shrugs and turning back to their conversation. Victoria, however, refused to let their reluctance erode the core ethos the staff had worked so hard to implement. Meanwhile, Keanu watched from a distance. He saw how Victoria handled the tense moment. He observed her unflinching insistence that even the most unassuming guest be welcomed as a contributor. It seemed to affirm the transformation he had envisioned. No meltdown, no manager cowering before old norms. Instead, a calm upholding of the new approach to hospitality. As the evening continued, the charity's representative took the stage again, outlining the night's donation goals and introducing an auction. Exquisite art pieces, private getaways, and rare collectibles went up for bidding. The room pulsed with excitement, with well-dressed bidders raising paddles or nodding discreetly to place ever higher offers. For a moment, the old brand of exclusivity glinted in the air as affluent individuals scrambled to outbid each other. The staff, however, remained impartial, offering the same gracious attention to an anonymous donor as they did to a famous celebrity. At a table near the front, a rumor circulated that the next item up for bid might be a private dinner with the one who had quietly sponsored the entire gala venue. No one in that circle knew for certain who the sponsor was, though they believed it must be an ultra-wealthy patron with philanthropic tendencies. A wave of speculation whipped up, names of reclusive billionaires floated in hushed tones. The stage coordinator then announced the new addition to the auction list. A personal meeting, to be hosted at the Regent Crown, with an undisclosed philanthropic figure who would match the winning bidder's donation dollar for dollar. This news ignited a flurry of guesses. Enthusiastic donors salivated over the thought of doubling their contribution, while also enjoying a private audience with an apparently generous power player. Many eyes in the crowd darted around, scanning for any clue of who might be behind the offer. Toward the back, Keanu kept his composure, sliding into a seat at an unoccupied table. He made no move to draw attention, ignoring the curious glances that occasionally flickered his way. If anything, he seemed more focused on watching how the staff interacted with those who, months earlier, might have been deemed unworthy of a place in such an event. When the bidding for this special lot began, a hush of excitement seized the audience. Opening at a moderate sum, the offers spiraled upward with surprising speed. Renowned philanthropists, keen on the promise of a matched donation, raised their paddles. The total soared beyond typical charity night levels, each new bid outpacing the last as wealthy patrons vied to connect with an unknown but obviously influential benefactor. Some participants recognized that the philanthropic figure, whoever it was, possessed both the means and the inclination to direct large sums toward disaster relief. For the donors, it was more than a night of pleasant socializing. It was a chance to be part of a meaningful and very public commitment. At the very edge of the ballroom, a hush descended among the staff who had gathered during the auction's most electrifying moment. They too speculated about this surprise item on the list. Some wondered if it was orchestrated by the charity organization alone. Others suspected a direct link to Keanu's presence. But no one broke their stride in offering guests new glasses of water or discreetly clearing plates. Even in the midst of excitement, their dedication to courtesy did not waver. Finally, the bidding reached an impressive peak. The auctioneer's hammer came down to finalize a sum that left the audience murmuring in amazement. Cameras flashed, capturing every second. The winner, an investment mogul known for public philanthropy, stood for a moment, flushed with triumph, as everyone speculated on this soon-to-be-revealed host. A high-pitched wave of applause rippled across the hall, and the event coordinator nodded gratefully, promising that more details would come shortly. Yet the night was far from over. Almost as if on cue, the stage lights dimmed again, and a short sequence of heartfelt speeches followed. Charity organizers offered thanks to the hotel and to every donor. They presented personal stories of families who had benefited from past relief efforts, painting images of communities rebuilt and lives renewed. During these stories, the mood in the ballroom shifted from competitive bidding to reflective gratitude. Soft glimmers of tears shone in some eyes. The Regent Crown staff circulated quietly, ensuring that tissues, comforting smiles, and small tokens of support were within reach for anyone moved by the deeply personal testimonies. Amid this emotional segment, Victoria noticed a man in an outdated suit standing by the back wall, watching intently with an expression of quiet awe. He appeared unaccustomed to such formal gatherings. Nearby staff, fully embracing the changes the hotel had embraced, offered him a respectful greeting and guided him to an empty seat closer to the stage. There was no question of whether he looked the part. He was a guest now, and that was all that mattered. Across the room, Keanu nodded with approval at the scene, even though his expression remained subdued. Eventually, the speeches gave way to a softer hour. Guests mingled, sampling desserts and discussing potential future collaborations. The city lights glowed behind the long windows, forming a breathtaking nocturnal panorama. Soft music floated, blending with the delicate chime of crystal against glass. At the center of the ballroom, some attendees waltzed to the gentle notes. Others engaged in whispered conversations about business or philanthropy. Through it all, the hotel's staff remained present but unobtrusive, ensuring that every individual felt valued and accommodated. Outside the ballroom, in a spacious corridor lined with large-scale artwork, Keanu Reeves stood watching the swirl of motion from behind a tall pillar. He seemed in reflective thought, hands lightly clasped in front of him. Richard Morgan, the senior executive who had facilitated Keanu's surprise ownership transfer weeks prior, approached from a side entrance. They exchanged a few words in hushed tones, unnoticed by the crowd, and then fell into a shared silence, their gazes drawn to the glowing, vibrant gala. While no onlooker heard them, it was evident that the two men had concluded something important, as if finalizing the direction in which the hotel would proceed. Moments later, Richard nodded respectfully and returned to the midst of the gathering, leaving Keanu standing alone and thoughtful. During the final scheduled portion of the night, the organizers invited all guests to sign a ceremonial wall, inscribing a message of solidarity or a short dedication. The wall, a portable display set up near the stage, would be shipped to one of the charity's resource centers overseas, symbolizing global unity in the face of disasters. People lined up to add their names, capturing selfies as they wrote encouraging phrases or placed small tokens. Among them were famous entertainers, corporate CEOs, local community leaders, and ordinary donors. Staff helped direct the flow of participants, ensuring no one felt lost in the shuffle. Many paused in amazement at how seamlessly the event staff managed the varied crowd, guiding the wealthy and the modest with equal attention. At one point, the philanthropic investment mogul, who had won the match donation prize, strolled toward a small group of guests, proudly recounting how he looked forward to meeting the mystery host. Victoria overheard murmurs that the prize involved dinner in a private suite, along with a briefing on exactly how the donations would be channeled to the areas in need. This investor, apparently confident about his standing, wondered aloud if the unknown figure might be some old money heir or reclusive billionaire. For him, the entire affair carried a sense of competitive prestige. Slowly, the late hour began to settle over the event. The music softened. Guests slipped into more intimate conversations or drifted toward the polished terrace outside, exclaiming over the picturesque skyline. Staff who had started early shifts took turns departing, replaced by a fresh wave maintaining the same respectful approach. By that time, many had begun to suspect that Keanu Reeves was somehow involved in the surprise auction item, but without official confirmation, the speculation remained half-formed. It was in the final hour, as the event's energy reached a gentle decrescendo, that Keanu made a quiet but definitive move. He approached the stage area, waited for a convenient gap in the proceedings, and stepped near the microphone in a manner that suggested he had arranged a private moment to address the crowd. Most guests who remained recognized him instantly, some for his film roles, others because rumors about his involvement in the hotel had circulated. A hush of anticipation fell across the room, welling up from a mixture of curiosity and admiration. He did not deliver a long or formal speech. Rather, he conveyed his gratitude for the cause, for those who had given generously, and for every person who had shown up to unify around a global mission of relief. His tone remained gentle. He spoke of having witnessed heartbreak in the world and the hope that collective effort could spark real solutions. Without boasting, he acknowledged that the Regent Crown had been transformed in recent weeks. Once focused on elitism, it now sought genuine hospitality. He hinted that he had personally invited the bohemian activist, the older woman unaccustomed to luxury, and a host of other unlikely attendees in hopes they would remind everyone that human dignity transcended outward appearances. Before stepping away, he confirmed that the match donation prize indeed involved him, as part of his role as the hotel's principal stakeholder. However, he declined to elaborate. Instead, he invited the auction's winner, along with a smaller circle of donors who had come close in the bidding, to join him the following evening in the hotel's rooftop garden for an informal discussion about how best to deploy the funds. Then, offering a modest wave, Keanu slipped out of the spotlight. In that fleeting moment, the Regent Crown's entire transformation crystallized into a single truth. The new culture of empathy would persist well beyond this one glitzy event. The very owner had shown that genuine hospitality wasn't about gatekeeping status. It was about forging connections that spanned wealth, background, and social standing. By midnight, the ballroom was nearly empty. A handful of stragglers wandered in pairs among the tall windows, finishing last sips of champagne and lingering in post-gala conversation. Soft gold lights, partially dimmed, gave the space an ethereal glow, and in the distant corners, staff methodically packed away the auction decorations, the floral centerpieces, and the extravagant photo backdrops. The once vibrant energy settled into a tranquil hush. Victoria, who had remained on her feet the entire night, observed the final guests depart. She felt a weight lifting inside her, a sense of gratitude that overshadowed her early panic. She recalled how she once believed that prestige hinged on keeping a tight circle, screening out anyone deemed unfit. Now she perceived that real distinction came from welcoming everyone with equal heart, forging a richer and more human sense of luxury. In the days that followed, news of the gala spread through social media and philanthropic circles. Mainstream outlets highlighted the unexpectedly large donation totals, while bloggers praised the inclusive atmosphere that defied typical notions of exclusivity. The bohemian activist shared stories of receiving respectful treatment, despite having felt certain she would be side-eyed and pushed to the margins. A wave of smaller donors championed the event as the highlight of their year, an unusual experience of being valued at a place historically reserved for the affluent. Amid the positive buzz, some cynics questioned whether this shift in approach was merely a media stunt, a ploy to generate good publicity for the hotel. But in the Regent Crown's corridors, staff could feel the difference in daily practice. Guests from across the spectrum arrived, many emboldened by stories about the hotel's owner. A young family, having saved up for a special weekend in the city, checked in with wide eyes, only to be greeted with the same courtesy extended to a wealthy regular. Housekeeping staff, front desk agents, and concierges chatted among themselves about how refreshing it felt not to guess guests' status, but to greet them with a genuine smile. Keanu remained in the city for another week, still drifting through the hotel in his low-key style. He occasionally appeared at staff gatherings to inquire about their experiences. Never once did he resort to scolding or belittling. Instead, he listened, nodded thoughtfully, and asked how the changes might be made sustainable. He also conveyed, with minimal fanfare, that the charitable donations generated from the gala had already been transferred toward relief efforts, doubling the matched amounts as promised. As for Victoria, she discovered that guiding staff in a culture of inclusivity felt far more purposeful than policing the velvet ropes for the ultra-elite. She devoted herself to refining employee handbooks, not with new limitations, but with more language about courtesy, empathy, and a sense of shared accountability. She made time to speak with every department, ensuring that each corner of the hotel, kitchens, laundry services, maintenance, understood the role they played in making every guest feel valued. Richard Morgan, who had once thrived on exclusivity, adapted as well. Although he maintained a certain fondness for tradition, he respected Keanu's vision and recognized that the strategy was bearing financial results too. Guests now shared personal stories about the warmth of the service, amplifying the hotel's reputation. Even travelers who could afford any luxury property in the world expressed curiosity about the Regent Crown, lured by rumors of a hidden philanthropic star at the helm, and by the possibility of encountering a truly respectful environment. Inevitably, some staff left, uncomfortable with the new direction. A few departing employees insisted that a five-star hotel should maintain stringent standards about appearances and wealth. Yet for everyone who departed, Victoria was able to hire two more who found meaning in a workplace that promoted genuine hospitality rather than elitist gatekeeping. Over time, the staff dynamic stabilized, shaped by individuals united under the same guiding principle. Toward the end of that week, Keanu orchestrated an unannounced gathering in the rooftop garden, a serene space with lush greenery, ambient lights, and a panoramic view of the skyline. He invited staff from every level, bellhops, housekeeping supervisors, front desk managers, kitchen leads, and even new hires. He also asked for a small group of guests to attend, including a returning couple who had once been dismissed by the old policies and a philanthropic ally who had come to admire the changes. At first, many of those invited expected a formal ceremony or speech. Instead, they found themselves in a relaxed setting with modest refreshments, faint music drifting on the cool night air. Keanu spent the evening moving among the attendees, quietly inquiring about their perspectives. He listened to a bellhop describe how empowering it felt not to second-guess a guest's worthiness. He nodded as a young desk clerk recounted the night she escorted an anxious traveler to her room, noticing how relieved the traveler was to find no sense of judgment in the staff's eyes. He exchanged a few words with the couple who had come back after a previously discouraging experience, grateful to see them finally enjoying the hotel's amenities. Victoria found herself standing at the edge of the garden, looking out over the glittering city. She felt footsteps approach and turned to find Keanu by her side, offering a brief, wordless smile. Though they spoke only a few phrases in low voices, no one else overheard. She sensed that he was commending her for her role in the transformation. Perhaps he also conveyed how deeply he believed in the ripple effect of a single changed viewpoint. She gave a respectful nod, acknowledging the humbling realization that had come from her own misjudgment that fateful evening. Several staff members drifted past, noticing the exchange between the senior manager and the unassuming owner. There was a silent recognition that this moment symbolized the completion of a circle. The manager who had once turned Keanu away was now standing beside him, representing a hotel that treated every person with dignity. The entire rooftop gathering felt like a quiet celebration of how far they had all come, and how the story of the Regent Crown was no longer about exclusivity, but inclusion. When the impromptu garden party concluded, Keanu left the staff with a simple message. He was planning to depart soon, confident that the hotel's culture was in steady hands. He believed that leadership should be entrusted to those who had embraced the core values, not dependent on one figure's constant supervision. In the days that followed, staff members went about their tasks with renewed vigor, ensuring that the standard Keanu championed was maintained. The presence of the philanthropic champion might fade from the lobby, but the internal compass set in motion would remain. By the time Keanu quietly slipped out of the Regent Crown, carrying a single bag, dressed in everyday clothes, and giving a good-natured farewell to the bellhop at the door, he was no longer just the secret new owner. He had become the catalyst for a deeper shift. The employees watched him vanish into a discreet car, perhaps heading to the airport or another city, continuing a life in which he showed compassion in the simplest, most unadorned ways. Not long after, the Regent Crown Hotel received unexpected recognition from hospitality publications and travel review platforms. Guests from all walks of life championed the property's refusal to discriminate. Corporate event organizers highlighted the success of the big charity gala. Travel bloggers recounted how even backpackers, if they could afford a single splurge night, were welcomed with equal courtesy. Although no marketing campaign trumpeted these details, the organic buzz intensified. Within months, the hotel's occupancy rate soared, not through the old trickle of hyper-wealthy elites, but through a broader range of patrons drawn by stories of sincerity and grace. Victoria stood near the reception desk one crisp afternoon, reviewing an arrangement of fresh orchids that had just arrived for the lobby. She reminded herself of how, only a short while ago, those very orchids might have seemed like symbols of elitism. Now they simply felt like a welcoming flourish for anyone passing through. While adjusting a stray orchid stem, she overheard a staff member politely assisting a newcomer who confessed unease about navigating such an upscale environment. The staff member's response radiated acceptance, offering to walk the guest to the lounge and ensure all her questions were answered. That single, unremarkable exchange might have gone unnoticed by passers-by, but Victoria recognized it as the real triumph. The new tradition of the Regent Crown existed in the daily, human-scale gestures of warmth and assistance. On days when her responsibilities felt overwhelming, she thought about the night she had nearly forced Keanu Reeves out of the hotel. A cold embarrassment still prickled her whenever she recalled how certain she had been in her assumption. Yet that error had unexpectedly become the gateway to a more honorable vision of leadership. Now her role wasn't to uphold arbitrary barriers, but to lead a team committed to genuine hospitality. Over the following months, a steady stream of letters and emails arrived at the hotel's management office, some from philanthropic groups referencing the successful gala, others from families who had felt a special welcome on a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Each note reinforced the sense of pride that permeated the staff. The days of measured stares and dismissive attitudes receded further into memory, replaced by a sense of purpose in every gentle greeting and supportive gesture. And so, the Regent Crown stepped confidently into a new era, carrying the lessons of one surprising evening's test when a disguised owner walked in and refused to be judged by appearance alone. Keanu Reeves no longer needed to hover in the background with secret phone calls or incognito check-ins. His influence had already taken root in the hearts of the managers and staff who now, every morning, reminded themselves of the moment that changed everything. The moment they realized that no guest should ever be made to feel unworthy. In time, a plaque was quietly installed in the main lobby. It was positioned in a tasteful alcove not far from the front desk, often overlooked by hurried arrivals. The plaque bore a simple inscription referencing the hotel's new guiding principle, that true luxury arises from mutual respect, and that a single moment of kindness could reshape an entire institution. The text did not mention Keanu by name, nor did it recall the manager's initial misstep. Instead, it served as a modest reminder that real hospitality transcended status, shining a light on the innate dignity of every person who passed through those polished doors. And though the future remained unpredictable, The staff understood that so long as they honored this creed, the Regent Crown Hotel would continue to thrive, no longer just a showpiece of glittering surfaces and guarded thresholds, but a place where, day after day, a spirit of welcome reigned supreme. Through it all, the memory of Keanu's anonymous arrival stood as a lasting testament to the power of one quiet visitor to turn an entire palace of pretense into a home of genuine human warmth. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. That way you'll never miss our newest uploads.